The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to today's University of Louisiana System Budget Briefing webinar. My name is Jackie Tisdale. I'm the Communications Director at the UL System, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. For those of you who have not joined us before, these budget briefing webinars are 30 minutes in length, which includes a presentation and a question and answer session. All microphones are muted except for our speakers. If you would like to submit a question for our panelists, please use your question chat module. Those questions come directly to me. They are not seen by other attendees. And at the end of the presentation, I'll address your questions to our panelists as much as time will allow. Please be reminded this webinar is recorded and will be archived at ulsystem.edu/webinar. Today's focus is on legislation for the 2015 Louisiana legislative session, and specifically the bills filed that relate to higher education. So with that topic in mind, I'm going to launch our weekly poll. You should see this poll on your screen. The question we're posing to you today is how many bills address taxes, credits, and exemptions? Your choices are between 1 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or 75 to 100, or over 100 bills. So please make your selections. We'll keep that open for just a few more seconds. And of course, the answer to the question is going to be in today's presentation. All right, just 10 more seconds. All right, poll is closing, and I'm going to share the results. You should see the results on your screen. Pretty close vote. The majority of you, which is, well, actually only 29%, believe that there are 50 to 75 bills filed addressing taxes, credits, or exemptions, followed by a tie between either 25 to 50 or over 100 bills. Okay, so today's our speakers are going to be Rachel Kincaid, UL System Vice President for External Affairs, and Dr. Edwin Lidoff, our Vice President for Business and Finance. UL System President Dr. Sandra Woodley is traveling today, and she'll join us again next week. So at this time, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Dr. Edwin Lidoff.
Good morning. We want to start off the way we started off each presentation we've done the last couple of weeks, where we're showing that higher education is down $700 million. The University of Louisiana System is down $293 million from 2008-2009 to this current year, 2014-2015. You can also see the change in funding sources for the University of Louisiana System. We used to be 62% state funded. We're currently 31% state funded. Basically 70% funded by tuition and fees. You can see that tuition and fees have increased 61%. State general fund, the state funding has decreased 55% for a difference of $90 million in total funding. So the students have been increasing tuition by $3,000 since 08-09, over 61%, yet the institutions have $90 million less to work with than previously. During that time also, the system and institutions have cut 2,455 employees. They have 508 less faculty, 360 less administrators. We've decreased our salaries by 18%, and our related benefits are up $26.7 million. So even though we've reduced salaries and employees, our related benefits, health care and retirement benefits have gone up. We've eliminated and consolidated over 300 academic programs. We've increased online courses, and we've increased collaborative degree programs. As you can see, when we compare ourselves to our peers, the University of Louisiana System gets $8,800 per FTE student, compared to the peers of $12,322 per FTE student. You can see the retention rates and the graduation rates are on par with the peers. So with less funding, we do more. This takes us to where we're at currently today. We have $924 million in our budget. We have $75 million of increased cost, which is basically $1 billion. There is a shortfall in the budget of $608 million. With the $608 million is needed to fully fund TOPS, WISE, FOSFA, TOPS, and equity and STEM. One of the issues that we have in the budget this year is there's $372 million that is put in higher education but is not funded and is based upon contingencies, tax rebates, tax credits, inventory tax credits.
All right, thank you, Edwin. And so what we're going to do now is go to some of the bills that will be affecting higher education in this session. This is a particularly heavy session for bills. There were a number of bills that were, a great number of bills that were filed, much more than have been filed in the past. So we just want to go over a few of those bills that affect higher education. We're going to go over them by category. So essentially the first few that relate to general higher education is Representative Walt Lejay's bill, House Bill 323, that has to do with supplanting of tuition. So essentially, his bill would prohibit the practice of the tuition swap. We talked about this on the webinar before, and what Edwin just mentioned is even with an 80% increase in tuition, the total means of financing for all the institutions is still down $90 million. So essentially, when the tuition is swapped, when tuition increases happen, and that will happen again this fall, that tuition has already been swapped for the fall. So it's never a dollar-for-dollar swap because there's waivers and other things that affect that. So over time, that actually creates less support for increased tuition rates as opposed to the same. So Representative Walt Lejay's bill is actually a constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot in October 24th of this year. And he did have this bill last year and will propose it again. The next bill is Representative Brian Adams' bill, and essentially GRAD Act 2 has several autonomies for the campuses that allow them to be more efficient and take advantage of cost savings. However, over time, it seems like that many of those provisions were not available to the institutions for a variety of reasons. So what Representative Adams' bill does is expand those authorities to all the institutions in the state, as well as adds to those provisions. So some of the things that it adds as far as autonomies are some relief on outside contracting for auditors and risk management. Those mandated costs have increased at the campuses significantly, and so that bill tries to address that. Senator Conrad's Appel's bill, Senate Bill 175, is a study on regional efficiencies. So it asks the Board of Regents to conduct a study statewide to look at those campuses that are located fairly near each other and see if there are some efficiencies of scale that could happen there. It would include a review of consideration of mergers or closures or a variety of things. So there are 8 things that the Board of Regents will be asked to look at. So also, Senator J.P. Morrell, as well as Senator Conrad Appel and several other authors have offered Senate Bill 255 that would implement sexual assault policies for all university campuses across the state, both public and private. So the next session that we wanted to discuss is bills affecting the military. There are actually several. Representative LaRusso has proposed a bill that would expand veterans' benefits and perhaps may also be expanded to reservists. So that would allow additional military benefits for residents of Louisiana. Representative Burns' bill would designate certain campuses as military-friendly. It would allow veterans to have priority for their scheduling, ease of transfer, and application of their fees, fee waiver for their application fees. Senate Bill 247 by Senator Smith is actually a bill that would allow Louisiana to comply with the federal law with respect to the CHOICE Act, which allows veterans who are using their post-9/11 GI Bill benefits to have in-state tuition regardless of whether you live out of state or not. Next is our section on retirement. Last year was a big year for retirement. This year is not so much so. House Bill 45 by Representative Pearson would raise the retirement age for all new hires for post-secondary education to 62. Senate Bill 18 by Senator Adley would address the unfunded accrued liability payment that the institutions now face, which is essentially 22% for all employees. That accrues to about $300 million for all the institutions. So his bill takes a look at that. So our next section is on tuition and fees. There were a lot of bills on tuition and fees as well. House Bill 60 by Representative Carmody, House Bill 62 by Representative Foyle, and also House Bill 66 by Representative Carmody are essentially constitutional amendments that would allow either the institutions individually or the management boards to set tuition and fees for all institutions in the state. That would also be on the ballot on October 24th of this year. Senate Bill 155, which is Senator Jack Donahue's bill, is similar. It also allows tuition authority under the boards. It's not a constitutional amendment, so under the board authority it would allow, by statute, tuition and fee authority. House Bill 129 by Representative Jefferson would allow the HBCU institutions in the state some flexibility with their non-resident tuition rates. Essentially, the HBCU institutions in the state have a very high out-of-state population. They would like some flexibility on those rates to increase enrollment and attract other students to our state. House Bill 152 by Representative Broadwater would allow fee authority for all of the campuses to set their own fees. And House Bill 168 by Representative Carter would also allow the authority to set graduate tuition rates for all the institutions in the state. Lastly, Senate Bill 48, which was widely publicized in a couple of last 2 weeks, Senator Donahue and Senator Rappel are sponsors on a bill that would essentially set tops to the rate that was paid in 2014-15. So essentially it's not a cap on top, but it certainly would limit the rate that would be paid to in-state institutions for TOPS to this year's rate. So moving forward to tax credits and exemptions, which has been the majority of the bills that have been filed this year. So well over 132 will affect higher education in some way, because essentially majority of the legislators and the Governor's Office of Administration are looking at some of these credits, exemptions, and possible taxes to address the shortfall in the budget. There's a huge number of bills that have been filed this year, but there are only about 132 that really have some possibility of being part of the $608 million solution that will be considered. So what we've done on the next slide is just kind of recap the slides we've had before about the general amount that is spent every year on these particular credits and extensions. And then the next slide, we really break it down to the number of bills that have been filed on this particular cap or credit. So essentially on the motion picture investor tax credit, there's been 20 bills filed on that, so we expect there to be at least some vehicle that might pass. It just so happens on Monday, Ways and Means will actually meet, and we'll begin seeing the first of these bills. All of these bills have to start in Ways and Means. So on Tuesday at 9 a.m. in House Committee Room 6, they will begin to debate on one or two of these, and the motion picture tax credit is actually one of those bills. Now, there are certainly multiple authors on these, but so that's just one. The wind and solar energy credit, and the number of bills that are filed on that is 10. The estimated revenue, this is based on the FY 13-14 credits that were issued by the state. So we don't have the most recent, that's not out yet, but this is just in general the level. The Louisiana Citizens Property Insurance Assessment Deduction is $40 million. The Enterprise Zone Program Credit, there's a lot on that, that's 10. There are a number of bills that are on, filed on the excess federal itemized deduction, and they're varying degrees. A complete repeal of that, a 25%, a 50%. So what we're trying to do is monitor these bills, because it does become that they are part of an overall revenue solution or a tax solution or an offset that would go to address the shortfall in higher ed of $608 million. We kind of have to have a general idea of which bills would be included in that. The quality jobs credit has been discussed quite a lot, even though there's only a few bills on that. That is one that's been discussed by many legislators as one that would be, considered. The horizontal well exemption, the exemption for taxes paid to other states, the cigarette tax. There are numerous cigarette taxes, and there's also kind of variations on that. So the one we've listed here is essentially if it was raised to $1, would generate $250 million. However, there's other bills that raise it only to 87 cents, or so it's essentially would raise $100 million. There's been a lot of discussion about whether that would be directed towards healthcare, which has also a roughly $200 million gap in their budget. On the change to the net operating loss deduction, there's numerous bills filed on that. In addition to, that is a very large credit. However, all of the bills that have been filed have just been a scale of that credit, none are elimination. There's been one that's filed on the elimination of both tax holidays. There's also a variation of that in another bill, embedded in a bill with many repeals that would only repeal one holiday, not both. There's a lot of variations on the alcohol taxes, some raising them to the average on wine, some to the average on, so there's wine, it includes everything except beer, so wine is one, a variety of other different types of, different taxes on alcohol. Numerous bills on suspensions across the board of all credits and exemptions. So this estimate is just on a 20% suspension, which seems to be the most common of all the bills that have been filed, but there are some that do 10% or 15%, so there are many that are out there, variations on that. The inventory tax credit, which essentially is the refundable part that was mentioned in the governor's budget. There's 14 bills that are filed. Again, there are some that reduce it by a percentage, some repeal the refundable outright. The last one is on the internet sales, and so the internet sales is actually part of the 2015 tax study that was released earlier this year. The estimates on how much the internet sales tax would bring in vary widely. There's some discussion about whether or not Louisiana's current tax structure allows for them to take advantage of, if this bill was passed at the federal level, the full implementation of the bill. There seems to be some disagreement about that. So essentially that's why you see such a huge range. There was testimony given by Dr. Richardson, who did the 2015 tax study, that said that perhaps if this, the way the current tax structure is set up in Louisiana, that this was implemented immediately, it might only bring in $10 million in the first year. However, if Louisiana law were more in line with federal law, it could bring in as much as $800 million, but Louisiana can't begin to do that until the law is, the final law is passed at the federal level. So those are just in general. Essentially the bills that are available. It's actually a fire alarm for our building, so I apologize.
May I have your attention, please?
So Jackie, can maybe we go to questions?
An emergency situation has been reported in the building. Please exit the building immediately. Walk quickly. Do not run. Do not use the elevator. The building immediately. Walk quickly. Do not run.
So Jackie, are we ready to go to questions?
Will be advised when to return to the building. May I have your attention? An emergency situation has been in the building. Please exit. You will be advised.
So Jackie, perhaps with this, considering what we've got going on, maybe
Yeah, we're gonna have to cancel or stop the webinar. We will we'll post this presentation online, and apologize for this. We will talk with you.
We'll take those later.
We'll have to take questions later. You can send me an email and your questions. We'll try to answer those. Thank you.